We're back again for another HTML tutorial. This time we're learning about hyperlinks. Finally, the basis of what the internet is all about. Ways to connect web pages to other web pages and to be able to navigate through sites. For this, we'll go to our Web 1 projects folder that we've been using all along, and we'll make a new folder. And we will call this one Hyperlink Demo. And then in our text editor, we will go File and Save As. Go ahead and find that folder on your desktop for Web 1 projects. And then our Hyperlink Demo. Click the little drop down, select Hypertext Markup Language, and then index.html. And we're ready to roll. This is just the same skeleton that we've been using for all of our pages. So our doc type, our HTML tags, the head and the body. In the head section, we have a title that I called Hyperlinks. The meta char set's UTF-8, so we have access to our characters on our screen. And then meta name is description, content is just demonstration of hyperlinks, because that's what this page is about. And again, that is what shows up on your search engines in your browser. And now we're ready to get to the body here. We'll begin with a header on this. We won't get too crazy with semantics because the main important part of this is learning hyperlinks, but we will have a little bit of structure to it. In the header, we'll put in an H1, as we always do. And in the H1, we will call this Hyperlink Demonstration. All right, there are three types of hyperlinks that we're going to be learning about today. One of them is called the anchor link, or sometimes people call it a jump link. Then we're going to talk about relative hyperlinks and also absolute hyperlinks. All right, on here with this we have hyperlink demonstration, and then underneath that we are going to put in H2. And then we'll go, we'll just call this part 1. And underneath that, we can use a unordered list. And we'll close the unordered list. And then we'll put a list item there. Part 1, and then we have this information there underneath it. That looks pretty good. And then we can just copy this part right here. And we'll paste this. We'll go with about that many of them. I think that'll work. Okay, now we'll skip this first part 1 for now, and we can actually just call it table of contents. We'll come back to it in a little bit. But down here we have part 1, and there, like I said, three types of hyperlinks. So the first one that we'll actually use on here is going to be what is called the absolute hyperlink. We'll start with that one. So an absolute hyperlink is anytime we have to use a web address and we have to type in the entire address in there. So if I go in here to Chrome and I go to w3schools.com, and here's the W3 Schools site, I can copy this link up here at the very top. And then the way that we could do this is we could type in like whatever we want the link to be. So I'll just call this W3 schools link. All right. And then after that, we can use something like an A link to the left. And then we'll close the A link to the right. And then in the opening part of the A link, we will use a little href equals quotation marks, and then we just paste in this address on here. This W3 schools page is on the outside of my domain. I don't have W3 schools saved inside my domain. It's a totally different site, totally owned by someone else. The only way I can link to it is with an absolute. And I just remember an absolute link means that I have to put in the absolutely whole long web page address of where that's at. All right, and then if I save that and go to my folder here and find my hyperlinks demo, open up my page, and if I click on this, it's going to take me to this page. Another thing we can do here with this A link is we can also, after the quotation marks, we can go target equals quotation marks underscore blank quotation marks. If I save that and I try this out again, and I'll click back on here and refresh my page. If I click on the school W3 schools link now, you'll see instead of it taking me to the page within this window, it actually opens it up in a new tag. So if you want to have it open up in a new tab, sometimes that's not a bad idea, because then, especially if you're going to an external link, then they can still easily get back to your page just by closing that other tab. Something to keep in mind while you're working on that. All right, that's the first example that we have on there. And then here we will just kind of copy this link so it's kind of the same in each of these. And then we just have some information underneath it. We'll switch this one, we'll call it part 2, and this one part 3, so that it looks at least a little bit differently here. The next thing that we can do is we can actually link to different pages on the same page, and this is called an anchor link or sometimes a jump link. And for that, we can do this up in our table of contents. All right, I will paste one more in here because I have 3 sections, and in here I will go part 1, and then part 2 and part 3. All right, now for this. In order for this to be able to find any of these elements down here, we need to actually give these a different name. And these are all H2s, but we can actually give them each their own ID, their own individualized identity, if you will. And if I go down here to the H2, and you can give anything an ID. It could be an H2, it could be the UL, it could be a specific LI. Any type of those semantic elements is fine, or even if it's a div. And we have H2, I'll put a space in here, and then I'll type in ID equals quotation marks, and I will call this one, I'll just give it the ID of part 1. And I will have it be all lowercase, all one word, and number, but it'll all be combined in there. Then I can copy this ID and I can go in here and paste it here and go part 2. Then here, make sure I have space, paste this here, and I will go part 3. I could also give my table of contents an ID. I'll go ahead and do that. I'll paste this up here, but I'll say this one is part 0. All right, those each have their own ID. And now to link this to the different areas, I still use my A tag. So I'll put an A on both sides of this. And then in here, I will go href equals quotation marks, but instead of putting an address in there, I'm going to call the ID that it's going to. I cannot just type part 1, part 2, part 3. I call an ID with a pound sign. So I'll use my little pound sign here, my hashtag, and then I will type in there part 1. All right, and then we can copy this A tag here, and then we'll paste it into each of these, but then change the 2 into 3. And then here we can copy this one and spacing, I put that on the wrong side there. There we go. And then I'll paste it in here and paste it right here. Okay. Once that's done, it would be nice to have a way to go back up to the top. Even though this is a short page, we'll pretend it's a really long one. And if we copy this A link here, actually we can just copy this entire A link. And then we'll paste it in here in our second list item for part 1. And then we'll change the text and say back to contents. And then instead of having it linked to part 3, we'll have it linked to part 0 because that is this up here. And then the good thing about when you have a back to the table of contents, these are my favorite ones to make because then you can just copy that and paste it and you don't have to even change the text for any of those. All right, we have that saved. We'll go back here to our web page. We'll refresh it. Now when I click on here, it's not going to work because the page itself is already one page long. So there's no scrolling. So in order to test it, unless you have a very, very long page, the best way to test it is just to shrink your browser window down. And then if I click on part 1, it takes me to part 1. Then I'll go back to contents. And it takes me back up to contents. Then I can click part 2 and back to contents. And then I can click on part 3 and back to contents. Again, if we have a lot of content on there, then you don't have to shrink the menu. But that's kind of a useful thing, especially if you have one web page that is very long and it's like, do you want the person to have to go and scroll all the way down and find it? Maybe there's a little table of contents at the top or on the side where you can kind of use it as a way to jump to your important content that the user wants to see at that time whenever they want to. All right, that is anchor links or jump links, and it is absolute links. The third type is going to be our relative link. All right, and what we'll do for that, we need a second page. Yes, that is right, a second web page. We can copy everything on this particular page. It'll be fine. And then we'll go File and New. And then I'm going to paste all of this information in here. And then go File and Save As. and find my hyperlink demo folder. I want to go here and go to hypertext markup language file. And now when I rename this, we already have an index.html. That's our home page, right? This is the time where you finally get to name your second page whatever you want. It does not matter what you name any of your web pages. Your home page just absolutely always has to be called index.html. I can call this one, like, I'll just call it contact. You do want it to be like all lowercase, all one word, so that it's easier to use. I'll call this one contact.html. And now we don't have just a web page, we have a website. And I will take everything out of the body here, but I will change the H1 on this one to contact us. And then underneath that, we might go with like a paragraph. Feel free to email us at any time. And then if we wanted to, we could, have our business contact information on there, or however you want to do that. For right now, we just want this as a second page, okay? Now, let's go here and we'll put in a paragraph, because an anchor tag does not have to be in any particular, it doesn't just have to be in a list like what we did earlier. It could be anywhere. It could be in a paragraph. It can be within a sentence of a paragraph. If I wanted to put an anchor link just for the word email, I could put the A right there, the A right there, and then tell it where it needs to go, and then the person can just click on email, and then it would open that up. So let's do that. We could say click here to return to the home page. All right, and if we want to have the person click here, we'll put our anchor tag on both sides of that. And with this anchor tag, starts off the same way, href equals, but instead of putting in the entire web address, because our home page is saved in the same folder that this contact page is in, we can use what's called a relative hyperlink. And these are easy because you just type in the name of the web page, index.html. All right, and then if I go back over here and click the tab to go to my index, I will copy one of these links on my table of contents here. And then here I will change this one to contact, and then I will replace # part 3 with contact.html. And it's okay if that opens it up right in the same window, because it is part of the same site and everything. So I don't mind if they get lost within my site. You want it to be easily navigatable, but you just don't want people to go to another site linked to ours and then forget about us. All right, then we'll make sure this is all saved, and then we can go here. We will refresh this. We have our link showing up on there. We click contact, takes us to our contact page, and then here, click here to return to the home page, and there you have it. It's our very first website. It's links all linked together. Pretty cool to see. Appreciate you watching. Let me know if you have any questions, and we'll get you on our next lesson.